It was me, I clicked something.
No, it's all right. It's just George being clever, Jackie.
Just me clicking stuff. Right, we are now recording as well.
Yeah, so thanks, George, for the housekeeping.
I think I've got it twice. I've got two voices. No one else got two voices.
Have you got the live stream open, Jackie, as well?
I don't know, actually. I mean, it may be.
I don't know,
I
then,
think
Jackie.
I have.
I'm sorry.
All right.
Hang on.
Okay. Right.
You're right.
We'll see how Jackie gets on.
Right, so so I'm Leslie. I'm the chair of the Greenhavens Network. It's lovely to see so many people, and I'm glad to see that our two speakers have made it. And we're absolutely overjoyed to be able to launch our Wilder Garden project, which we're running throughout March. Those of you in New Haven that will have received your leaflets will see that we've got some fantastic talks coming up later on in the month. And if you haven't booked onto those, please do so quickly before they sell out like tonight's did. They're obviously free, as it says on the leaflet. And at the end, George mentioned the Q&A at the end of each talk. Please do put questions in the comments box or on the live feed on Facebook. And also at the end of the after the two speakers have finished, we'll be doing some Greenhavens Network business. So anybody here who is representing one of our member groups, if you'd like to stay behind afterwards so that we can do that bit of business, that would be great. But we'll let you know at that point when that is going to happen. So I don't think I've got anything else to say. Karen is going to say a bit more, I think, but I think the next thing I need to do is to introduce Dan Fagan, who is from National Trust, and he is going to give us a talk about what the National Trust are doing in the local area, I understand. When you're ready, Dan.
Okay, right, I'm going to try and share my screen, I think.
You should now have co-hosts, so it should all be working. Fingers crossed.
Okay, thanks, George. Let's see how this goes. Can we see that?
Yes, all good, Dan.
Yeah?
Brilliant,
Yes,
thank you.
Yep, I can see it.
Hey.
Okay, we're away. Right, okay, thanks everybody for inviting me to come and talk. My name is Dan, I'm the lead ranger for the National Trust, covering the South Downs East area. So what I'll do first of all is just give you a quick introduction to my patch. So myself and my ranger team manage the South Downs East area within the South Downs portfolio. So the South Downs countryside portfolio for the National Trust is very big. It stretches from Blackdown over in Hazelmere. It includes Slindon, places like East Head. But my team mainly focus on the countryside around Brighton and Hove, New Haven and Worthing. So we stretch from High Down Hill over in the west. We include Cissbury Ring, Southwick, Folking Escarpment, Wolstonbury Hill, Ditchling Beacon, Blackcap, Devil's Dyke, Saddlescombe Farm and the New Timber Complex. A small area of land over at Telscombe. The Cuckmere Valley, Frogfurl, and areas towards the east, including Gales Farm, Crowlink and Beltoot. So it's a very large, complex and dynamic portfolio. We're made up of around 1,823 hectares of land. So that's around 3,000 football pitches. So it's quite a large plot. We have over 78 miles of fence line, over 190 kissing gates and stiles, 29 scheduled monuments and over 1,000 notable monuments. We've got 2 historic downland farms. One is Saddlescombe Farm and the other farm is Frogfurl, just above Seaford. We've got 7 triple SIs, which are made up of chalk grassland, deciduous woodland, and internationally important lowland meadow. And we've got 9 tenant farmers across our estates. So the estate is very large and complex. It's quite dynamic. So I struggled to think about what to talk to you about tonight, but what I thought I'd do is focus on the National Trust's wider ambition for nature. And that's mainly around restoring a healthy, beautiful and natural environment. And I guess this is our ambition statement. Our land will be amazing for nature, healthy, beautiful, rich in wildlife and culture, enjoyed and productive, and it will be for everyone to enjoy. So what I wanted to do tonight is talk about the landscapes that we manage, some of the decisions we make when we're managing our land. So I'm going to give you 3 examples. I might have lost control. Oh no, here we go. Right, so the first one is Sisbury Ring. So anybody who hasn't been to this site, it's definitely worth a visit. Just north of Worthing, Sisbury Ring is the largest hill fort in Sussex and is the 2nd largest in England. It's designated a Scheduled Ancient Monument because of its hill fort, but also because of the 200 Neolithic flint mines, which you can just see on the front of the hill there, those undulations that are coming towards the front of the screen. They're all the different flint mines. But Sisbury Ring is also a SSSI designated for its chalk grassland. So it's a slightly difficult site to manage. One, because of its archaeological sensitivities, but 2, because we have to manage it for its chalk grassland designation. So on many of our chalk grassland sites across the South Downs, what we do is we pull out a tractor, maybe some machinery to help tackle the scrub and some of that invasive tall grass, but we can't do that at Sisbury Ring. Monitoring biodiversity is really easy because we can go out there and survey it, but archaeology is slightly more difficult. We can see here the undulating ground, which is clear around the ramparts, around the hill fort, and we can see the flint mines. But Sisbury Ring has been a site of that's been used by man for over 2,000 years. So there's so much more there. And that became really clear when a survey was commissioned by the Royal Commission on Historical Monuments of England. And what they were able to do is survey the site and then overlay that on a map for us. And this is what they sent us. So these are all the archaeological remains on Sisbury Ring. And as you can see, they are absolutely everywhere. There is not a single gap. On the left-hand side of your screen, you can really clearly see every single flint mine. On the right-hand side at the top there, you can see an old Roman temple, which is forming that square shape. And everything else is every bit of human interaction that has happened on that site over the past 2,000 years. So it's incredibly sensitive. So how do we manage the SSSI chalk grassland on a site that is this sensitive? And instead of looking for new ways, actually what we ended up doing is looking at the old ways of managing things. And we started to look at more of a natural processes driven approach. And that was when 5 years ago, we introduced a herd of new forest ponies to Sisbury Ring. And these have become iconic. So walk up to Sisbury Ring today and you'll find 11 new forest ponies roaming the ring and doing what they do best, which is eating scrub. And that's amazing for 2 reasons. One is because it helps the archaeology. Scrub and the roots turn up the archaeology and they damage it, but also it's invasive on the chalk grassland. So the ponies do a great job on both sides. And also they help restore some of those natural processes into that ecosystem. Ponies aren't wormed, so their poo is great for invertebrates, and they molt, which means that some of their fur can be used by nesting birds. So what we're doing across our landscapes is, instead of trying to look for new ways of doing things, we're trying to come back to these more natural-led processes to help us manage our sites. And the other benefit, as well as being really sensitive to the archaeology, is that ponies are great for people. They aren't as scary as cows. Sheep get easily chased by dogs. And ultimately, it makes the site far more easier to manage from a public access point of view. So we try and look back at these natural processes because ultimately they are cheaper as well in the long term. Not having to bring a machinery onto site and just leaving it down to horses to naturally graze the environment is a much cheaper way of doing things. So Sisbury Ring, a great place to look at natural processes. And if anybody locally across our sites, you'll see that we've actually started pony grazing a lot more. So we've started pony grazing at Beltoot over the past couple of years. At Gales Farm, we've just reintroduced a very small herd of Exmoor ponies up at Devil's Dyke. So expect to see a lot more wild ponies grazing on the South Downs because they are great for biodiversity and they are great for archaeology. The next example I wanted to share with you was Wolstonbury Hill. So Wolstonbury Hill is just close to Clayton, and it is a hill that has been unchanged for many years. There's a great photo here taken in 1904, which shows the hill and the woodland in pretty much the exact same place. Wolstonbury Hill is a SSSI designated for its chalk grassland and also a scheduled monument designated for the hill fort on the top. And the great story here is all about biodiversity monitoring. So a chance happening with a ranger out on site, he met a gentleman out walking, and the gentleman was completely dismayed about the lack of orchids that had disappeared underneath some scrub. The ranger had no idea that orchids existed in that part of the site. Went away and started looking at the old biodiversity records and anything that we could find. He came across a survey from around 1940, which did indeed show this area as being really important for orchids. And there was one orchid in particular, which this survey mentioned and the gentleman mentioned, which is the greater butterfly orchid. Pretty uncommon in England and certainly uncommon in this region of the South Downs. So it was a pretty exciting time to think that we might have greater butterfly orchid on site. So we were helped out by the Friends of Wolstonbury Hill, who started clearing the area. So this is what it looked like. So we're back in about 2005, and it took them 3 years to clear. So slowly cutting back the secondary woodland that was encroaching on the site. And then we brought in some cattle to help us graze it and keep down the regrowth. And lo and behold, after about a year or so, we had our first greater butterfly orchid on site. And then within 3 years, the numbers had absolutely skyrocketed. So this is what the greater butterfly orchid looks like. You can see it's very tall, and the style of the flowers are absolutely fantastic. But here it was the numbers that were really unexpected. A survey was carried out by some great botanists called Dave Pearce and Catherine Stott. And they went out and they started to monitor the numbers of greater butterfly orchid on site. And within a couple of years, we've got up to 300 spikes on site, 300 individual flowering plants. And I'm talking on a bit of land which is probably only an acre in size. So absolutely extraordinary that these plants were sat within the seed bank, just waiting for the light to return. The numbers dropped off fairly quickly. They seemed to have this boom in population. And obviously there wasn't enough mycorrhizal fungi, perhaps in the soil, to support that population. But I'm pleased to say that the numbers that we had this year have rocketed up to 272 again. And of the 11 orchids that are found at Wolstonbury Hill, 9 of those species are found in this acre plot of land. So it's fantastic to think that we've been able to look at old records, identify an area which is so important, been able to restore that, and now we're monitoring again just to make sure that we can keep an eye on the numbers. But I think this is a real key example of how biodiversity monitoring is so important, and how looking back to the past for those little keys of information which tell you what the environment was like is so interesting, especially when you get results like this. So the last example I wanted to talk about is Gales Farm. So if anybody who doesn't know Gales Farm, it's the area of land in between the Seven Sisters Country Park and Burling Gap. And it's a site that was used for the former site of the RAF Friston. So here's a map showing what Gales Farm used to look like. And you can see there used to be an emergency landing runway on the site during World War II, so that planes returning, if they didn't quite have enough fuel to go further north, they could make an emergency landing on Gales Farm. If you walk it, it's the only bit of flat land in that area, so it made perfect sense. It's a site that we've been trying to open up more to the public. Access is absolutely at the heart of what we do. So we've actually created a Gales Farm Discovery Trail. If anybody hasn't been on it yet, it's a great walk. You can park at our car park at Crowlink, The walk takes you around Gales Farm and actually around the old former airfield. A lot of the archaeology has disappeared, but actually you can see areas where there used to be the airfield. There's a small monument there which denotes it, and you can see where the old gun houses used to be as well. But there's lots of potential here, and that's coming into shape through the Changing Chalk project. So if anybody hasn't heard about this, it's a project which is being led by the National Trust. It's made up of 10 partners. And it's an HLF National Lottery Heritage Fund project working in partnership to connect nature and people and heritage for the future of the Downs. So we're looking at restoring downlands, preserving archaeology and cultural heritage, and trying to get in as many people involved in preserving the Downs for the future as possible. And at Gales Farm, we're trying to do this by reinstating those runways. The runways have disappeared. The site is currently under arable use. We have a fantastic tenant farmer there who already does so much for wildlife, but we're trying to do something more. And what we're proposing to do is to try and recreate the former runways in the form of lowland meadow. So we're hoping to plant up the runways in lowland meadow flower mixes so that they will flower every year, and that Gales Farm and the former runways, instead of being a runway and a look back to something that was an example of war, we can actually look to the future and look for something that's going to be really positive for biodiversity. But we can identify those runways through these wildflower strips, and they become great stepping stones and links between the triple SI that surrounds it. So before I jump on to the next thing, I think the main thing I want to say is we're trying to manage our sites at a landscape scale. The amount of land that we own is very large, it's very complex, but ultimately we have 3 key themes. One is about moving towards a more natural process-driven approach to the land that we manage, be that through long-term grazing or regenerative farming. The other is about monitoring, always looking to the past and seeing what has been done before and what was there before, and then monitoring going into the future. And the third thing is about working in partnership. So Gales Farm is a great example of that, and so is Changing Chalk, about working with our partners, working with our tenant graziers, and trying to link up all of our sites at a landscape scale. And I think the last thing I wanted to leave you with is a quote from Octavia Hill, who was one of the National Trust founders. And in 1988, she said that there are indeed many good things in life which may be unequally apportioned and no such serious loss arise. But the need of quiet and the need of air and the need of exercise, and I believe the sight of sky and things growing seem human needs common to all and not dispensed with without great loss. And I think that quote is relevant now as it was over 100 years ago. I think we all know that being outdoors is so important to our mental, physical and emotional health and well-being. And I think that this year, more than ever, nature outdoors has been a source of comfort for us in what has been a very uncertain world. And that can be from the rolling landscape of the South Downs to just a flower growing on a grass verge outside your doorstep. So it's great to hear about the Wildlife Project, the Gardening Wildlife Project, because all of those things link up. Something that you can do in your garden absolutely links to what we're doing at a landscape scale on the South Downs. I think the fact is that everybody needs nature in their lives, and anything that we can do to benefit nature is undoubtedly going to benefit us in the future. So when you can, please get out to our sites and visit us. And if anybody has any questions or needs any information, this is the email address that you can contact us on. So it's southdowneast@nationaltrust.org.uk. That's it from me. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Dan. If anyone's got any questions, they're welcome to pop them in the chat box if you can find that. If not, then just raise your hand and we can go around. And anyone who's on the Facebook Live, if you want to pop them in the chat box, then we can put them to Dan. Thank you, Dan. That's brilliant. So Robert from Sustrans has asked, where exactly are the orchids?
Okay, so the orchids on Wolstonbury Hill, the best way to describe them is that they are in the northwest of the site. It's an area that if you're looking at Wolstonbury Hill, it's on the very west-hand side. It forms up into a little bit of a point. The name of the field next to it absolutely escapes me, which is really, really annoying. But they're on the far west north hand side and a very small pointy bit. It's a bit that we call Orchid Bank. If anybody's interested, we usually do 2 walks a year, orchid walks that are led by a ranger there. And if anybody wants a map of exactly where to find them, absolutely email that email address and we can send you a map.
Spot on. Thank you, Dan. Is that good enough for you, Robert? I think that was very detailed. Brilliant. I can't see any more questions. There's a lot of love coming in for you, though, Dan.
Thank you.
So you're welcome to check that out in the chat box if you like, especially a nice comment there about loving the information about the orchids and the ponies, which is fantastic. Any other questions from anyone? I can't see anything coming in from our Facebook Live yet, so I'll keep an eye on that. But are there any more that anyone would like to just shout out? Don't worry about the chat box if you wouldn't mind shouting them out, that's fine.
Yeah, so I just want to say thanks, Dan. That was great, and it's so good to see that we've got so many lovely sites across the South Downs. It certainly makes, like I think a lot of people have just said, it's really making them want to go out, and I think we've all appreciated that time when we have been able to go out to some of the sites. I'd certainly like to go up to Wolstonbury and have a look now. When can we expect to see the orchids out? Will they sort of be like June time?
Yeah, anytime from May onwards. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Cool.
I've got a hand raised from Mandy Harris. Feel free to unmute.
Hello.
And, ask. Yep, there you are. Hi, Mandy.
Can you hear me?
Yep, loud and clear.
I hope you can hear me. I was wondering where you would find past records of biodiversity for research in local areas.
The ones that we find, or are you thinking about
Yes.
Perth? So actually, the record that we had from 1940s was donated to us. We got the information donated from somebody who just had it at the back of their wardrobe and thought that it might be interested. And it was fantastic. It's scrolling through those donations. They aren't recorded on a data system. Often some of these things are anecdotal. We might find some references from them in former descriptions of the site. But this was actually a donation, which is where we found the information about the orchids.
Fantastic.
Awesome. Cool.
Do you have a site where people can put their memories or their questions in order to facilitate that sort of research?
We don't, but it would be a fantastic thing to have, I think. I mean, we are always looking for people's information and stories. Whenever they come to us, we often try to publish them on our website, or we use them in our interpretation. So if anybody has any information or knows of anybody that knows the site, that knows the site, has perhaps been walking the site for many years, people, everybody out there is the eyes and ears. We can't be on the site all the time. So any information that people have about things that they used to see but don't see anymore is always really interesting for us.
Thank you.
Cool.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mandy. I've got a question also. I think I've got Jim Howell's got his hand up very patiently there. Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. Hi, Dan. Wolstonbury Hill is also a really good site for wax-capped fungi, which are the bright red and yellow coloured fungi that you can see in grassland, and it's a sign of good quality grassland. They're not in the same field as the orchids. It's the big hill going up towards the ancient monument, but it's a really good site for them too. That's in the autumn, obviously.
Yeah, we have a lot of sites which are excellent for wax caps. Wolstonbury is certainly one of them. The other site is Southwick Hill, which is just at the back of Mile Oak, which for the people that walk there and live there is a real treat, because when they go out in the autumn, the site is covered with pink and green and blue fungi, which is absolutely fantastic. But you're right, it's one of the key things about our grassland that there's never been any inputs into it. So yeah, Pangdean here, New Timber, Wolstonbury. I'm trying to think of sites over to the east. I think probably just below High and Over as well. We get some wax caps on the river cliff there, but not in the numbers that we get at Wolstonbury.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Jim. And Dan, I've just got a question that's also come in from John on Facebook. Are you taking any working volunteers out yet?
We aren't, John, but if you get to us in March, we're hoping that after March, beginning of April, we'll all be able to get back out there and get on the conservation work that needs to be done. So if you're interested in becoming a volunteer, we've got loads of volunteering opportunities, from scrub bashing, archaeological surveys, biodiversity surveys, built heritage stuff. So if anybody is interested in getting involved, absolutely do get in touch. That would be fantastic. The more hands, the better.
Awesome. Thank you, Dan. John, if you've got anything you'd like to come back on that, feel free to pop it in the comments box and I'll read it out for you. A couple more questions that have come in.
Can I ask a question? Because I can't get the chat to work.
Yeah, okay, Jackie. Yeah.
Hi, a really interesting talk. Thank you very much. As someone who lived in that area for over 50 years, it's really interesting to see it. I'm in France now, but it's quite nostalgic to look at that. And the ponies are really good. So maybe one day I'll come back and have a look.
Awesome.
COVID
Thanks,
permitting.
Jackie. I've got a couple of questions on the in the chat box. There was one from Julia about Gail's farm. Do we know how it got its name? Is it run by Gail? Was it owned by Gail?
Yeah.
I've got no idea, Julia. I'm so sorry.
There's always one.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I don't know, but I'm really interested to find out now.
So we've got another couple that have come in as well. One from Felicia. Can one cycle up or on Wolstonbury?
There are two bridle paths on Wolstonbury. So depending on which way you can come in from, you can either come in from the woodland, and there's a bridle way that runs around the outside of it, or there's a bridle way that runs from east to west, close to the edge as well. There's a scheduled monument in the middle, so you can't cycle on that bit, but there is a bridle way that goes around the outside of it. So you can certainly get onto the hill one way or another, just not onto the scheduled monument at the top.
Awesome. Thank you, Dan. Got another one that's just come in from, and that's a thank you from Felicia there. How do you liaise with groups adjacent to your National Trust land to help manage wider areas to mutual benefit? I was thinking of Hollingbury Hill Fort. That's from Alison.
So we are part of the farm cluster. So there's a farm cluster in the southeast, which we are part of. So that one includes all of our, or quite a lot of our tenant farmers, but also our neighbouring farmers as well. And then we're also part of wider groups that kind of try and link NGOs or non-government organisations and charities together. So we sit on people above me sit on much wider committee meetings around wider landscape management, working with people like the Sussex Wildlife Trust and the South Downs National Park, Brighton and Hove City Council, and the Environment Agency. So there are boards that are looking at things at a high level, and then at a ground level, we usually work with our neighbouring farmers either side to us through things like the farm cluster. Hollingbury Hill Fort, we don't have any land directly next to it, so I don't know the area that well, I'm afraid.
No, I was just thinking of the orchids. I've been up there, and there are some common sort of orchids up there. But I was just looking at your beautiful ladies. What they call them, butterfly orchids.
Yeah.
You know, I was just sort of thinking, gosh, it's probably a similar sort of landscape. And I suppose the danger is with having all these like little isolated pockets of land. It's looking at the whole approach, you know, trying to improve the landscape and join it up and have wildlife corridors and areas that can be used for a wider range of wildlife and wild, you know, nature, as it were. I couldn't find the hands up signal. I'm used to using Teams rather than Zoom, so sorry for just sort of
That's all right.
there.
That's okay.
No, that's exactly right. And we've been feeding into the Brighton and Hove City Council Downland estate. A lot of their land runs straight up to ours, and wildlife corridors and connecting the landscape has been a big output from that. So I'm really hoping that they're going to kind of take.
Yeah, well, I think Brighton and Hove own Hollingbury. I think that it's by the golf course, so I mean it's a public course.
Yeah,
I'm guessing there's been a bit of a hoo-ha about it, possibly selling it off or doing stuff with it. But I think that might be in abeyance at the moment.
Cool. I've got a nice comment that's just come in from Carly that I think's worthy of mention. Walsonbury is lovely. I did a sponsored walk up. It dresses a character from Life of Brian in memory of my friend Brian. Thank you for the talk. I'll definitely be visiting there again when I can. That's lovely.
Oh, that's lovely.
That's really lovely.
I think I want a photo.
Yeah, I think you should have a photo. Can we arrange that, Carly, please?
Sounds brilliant.
Superb. Okay, any more questions that anyone wants to shout out, as we've pretty much got through quite a few of them now, or whatever? No, I think there's nothing else that's coming on Facebook.
Can't see any hands.
Can't see any
No
hands. I
messages.
can't see any frantic waving. So I think we're all good there.
Right.
Carly's going to
thanks
try and
again.
get a photo, but it was 10 years ago. Awesome. Thank you very much, Dan. I'll hand you back.
Yeah,
Brilliant.
that was brilliant. Thanks, Dan. I think we're going to have a 5-minute anti-fidget grab a drink break, because I know I've certainly got to move around for a couple of minutes. So yeah, so we're just going to sort of have a little break. Stay here.
Recording again. There we go. Right. Spot on.
Where are we?
All yours.
Mine. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about the Wilder Gardens project that we're doing, which we're super excited about. Leslie's introduced it at the beginning with all our free talks this month. I just wanted to give some background to why we've decided to do this. It's all very much part of our Green Corridor project, which, as you know, we've been working on for nearly 4 years. And it's wonderful to see Jim's here tonight, because they did so much work in Seaford for the neighbourhood plan. And from Greenhavens working with them, I don't know how long ago it was now, but the only way to get that connectivity through the havens, Greenhavens, was through the gardens. And that's why we've decided that the Wilder Garden project. So it's very much, we've got about 3,000 members now, and a lot of our members are super already engaged in the environment. And what we're trying to do is reach out to people that aren't. So 6,000 leaflets went out last week, and hopefully some of you here tonight that have got through came because you had a leaflet. That would be nice if you can put in the chat that you did. Otherwise we've failed abysmally on week 1. But yeah, so it is very much helping each other to get those gardens connected for wildlife. And that is where Alice perfectly comes in. Thank you.
All yours, Alice.
Right. I will share my screen then. Right, can you all see that?
Yep, coming through nice and clear.
Excellent.
Yes.
Okay, right. Well, yeah, really nice to be with you all this evening to talk about one of my favourite subjects anyway, which is our insect pollinators. So my name is Alice Parfitt, and I'm a conservation officer with BugLife. And BugLife are a national conservation charity devoted to the conservation of all invertebrates, not just pollinating insects. And I'm working on a project called Changing Chalk, which Dan just mentioned. So working with partners, including the National Trust, on protecting the chalk grasslands landscape and connecting people with nature as well. So that's what I'm doing at the moment. So today I am going to talk to you a little bit about our pollinating insects, who they are, why they're important, what are the sorts of things they need, a very little bit on why they're declining, but also some things that we can all do to help as well. So first up, just a really brief mention of actually what pollination is. And it's essentially just because plants can't move around to find mates and reproduce, so need a little bit of help. And that help can come in the form of all sorts of things. It could be wind, which a lot of our trees and grasses are wind pollinated. If you have hay fever, you will know that already. But a lot of them are pollinated by animals. So it's estimated that actually 80% of British wild plants are pollinated by insects. So pollination is really important for the plants, which in turn makes it really important for growing our food. And if you have or grow some veggies or something like that, you know about companion planting, how planting that's beneficial to insects can really increase your yield and quality of the crops that you're growing. And it's estimated that 75% of all the crops we grow in the UK are insect pollinated. And obviously that's a lot of things like our fruit, our strawberries and apples that we can see there. So who are the insects that actually do this? It's estimated that there are 6,000 species of pollinating insects in the UK. And that's a figure that Stephen Falk has come up with, who is an eminent entomologist, and he's done a few sort of little calculations. It's obviously difficult to work out exactly how many there are, but that's the figure that we use, is about 6,000 species. And you would probably guess that things like bees and wasps might be involved with that, but actually there's a lot more species that are involved. So flies and hoverflies in particular are really good pollinating insects, but moths and butterflies are involved, as well as are beetles. They can all provide pollination services. And I always think when I look at this slide, I just have to sort of point out that although I talk about all of these insects carrying out this wonderful service for us in pollinating our food, they're all have their own intrinsic beauty and value, and I love them. For those of you that might know me, you'll know that I'm particularly like hoverflies, so that's what I go on about quite a lot. But we'll have a quick look at some of the sort of groups of pollinators. So our bumblebees, I think this is the one that we sort of all think about when we think about pollinators. They're big and furry. You see them flying around, visiting different plants. You can see the pollen on them. And it's quite interesting. There's about 270 species of bee in the UK. Only 24 of those are bumblebees. So bumblebees tend to be social animals. So they nest in, have communal nests. And they're often the first ones we see out in the year. So this week I have seen buff-tailed bumblebees, I've seen early bumblebees, and I've seen red-tailed bumblebees out. So they're the queens that overwinter as adults, and they're just sort of coming out now. So yeah, they're the ones that we often think about, you know, as sort of really sort of key pollinators. But there's also a huge group called the solitary bees, and they're called this because they tend to nest on their own. And this is a much wider group. You know, we're talking sort of 225 species of these, and these can come in all sorts of forms. We've got some nice sort of furry ones. We've got some small black ones. You can see the one in the top middle, the six-banded nomad. That looks very much like a wasp. So there's no sort of hard and fast rule of sort of saying, oh yeah, that's definitely a solitary bee. You can get your eye in after a while, but generally the bumblebees and solitary bees, you can kind of tell the difference fairly easily. And the one that I sort of see in the garden at the moment is the hairy-footed flower bee. They've literally just come out in the last week. In my garden, they really go for the comfrey. But they like things like primroses and pollinators as well. And then this is just a picture of the male, just to show how he gets his name from his lovely hairy-footed feet. So yeah, really nice bee for this time of year. So sort of moving on to some of our hoverflies. So there's around 280 species of hoverfly in the UK, They've got quite a diverse life cycle, so they sort of feed on different things. They're often thought as the gardener's friends. So some larvae of hoverfly feed on aphids, for example. So they're really great to attract into the garden for not only for the pollination, but for that predator control as well. And they're quite sort of varied in their looks as well. You can see the top middle, the Volucella bombilans, looks remarkably like the red-tailed bumblebee that we saw on a previous slide. So that's a really sort of defense mechanism to look like a bee. Hoverflies don't sting at all, but sort of one of the things you can tell the difference between hoverflies and bees are hoverflies got one pair of wings. They've got a special sort of vein on their wings, but you have to look really closely to see that. But also their antennae are fairly different. So you can see in this Volucella bombilans, if you look really carefully, it's got sort of kind of hairy antennae, whereas the bees have got much sort of longer, thinner antennae. So the antennae tend to be fairly different. And then the last little group of pollinators I'll just touch on are the butterflies and moths. I think we're all sort of aware that butterflies visit flowers, but a lot of moths do as well. There's been a bit of research on how much pollination they actually carry out, and they do carry some, but there's not been anywhere near as much research, for example, as on the bees. So they definitely visit flowers and move pollen around, but we don't really know how much. But they're definitely sort of there doing that job. So that's sort of some of our groups of pollinating insects, and now we sort of have to think what they need. And the one that we often think about when we talk about pollinators is, oh, we need something for the adults to feed. And that's normally sort of our wildflowers, whether that's in the garden or on the downs. We all kind of know that that's what they need. But we also have to think about what the larvae need. We have to think about where they're going to breed. Have we got anywhere for them to breed in our locality? They also need shelter for when either the weather is bad or overwintering sites. And they also need a mosaic of habitats. So some of our larger bees and hoverflies can fly quite a long distance from where they're nesting to where they feed. So they haven't really got too much of an issue. But some of our smaller bees, some of the solitary bees will only fly 1 kilometre at the very most to get from their breeding sites to their food resource. So we just have to think about how all of those sort of different resources fit together in the landscape, so we're providing sort of for all of them. So adults and larvae have a wide range of food resources. So the adults, you can see here, there's a lot of pollen underneath that bee, so they're collecting the pollen to take back to their nest. So the bee grubs feed on pollen, so the females collect that and take them back. So they need the pollen, but also all of these insects need nectar as well, so for the adults to actually feed on. And so there's sort of the size of the bee, the shape of it, how they feed, all sort of dictates what sort of plants that they use. Hoverflies, for example, don't have any specialised mouth parts, so they tend to feed on very open flowers. So things like we've got on the top row there, they're all hoverflies. We've got yarrow in the middle, we've got thistles and umbellifers. So those sort of open flowers really good for hoverflies. Our butterflies and moths have nice long proboscis. If you've ever seen them sort of feeding on buddleia or something like that, you can see they can really get down into some deeper flowers. And then our bees visit a huge range of flowers and have different ways that they feed. Some species will collect pollen from a wide range of flowers. Others will collect them from just a sort of a suite of plants. So something like the large scabious mining bee that we have back on the downs, quite a rare bee, but we do have it in our area. And that will feed just on the scabious flowers, so field scabious and small scabious. And then there's another bee called the aptly named the yellow loosestrife bee that only collects pollen from the yellow loosestrife plant. So there's different bees have sort of different sort of strategies for what they can collect their pollen from. And bumblebees are sort of split into two groups, long-tongued bees and short-tongued bees. So the long-tongued bees, like this garden bumblebee, can get their nectar and therefore pick up pollen from deep flowers, so things like foxgloves or bluebells, comfrey, so they can sort of get in deep to reach that nectar. And then species like the early bumblebee have a really short tongue, so they can't get into those deep flowers, so they have to go for more open flowers. But the really clever thing about some of these short-tongued bees is that they can actually rob nectar. And to do that, they go to some of these big long tube flowers and they just nip a hole, bite a hole in the bottom and go straight to the nectar. So bypass all of the pollen collecting and the pollination service, which I think is very cheeky, but also really clever. So we also need to have a little think about what plants, how different pollinators are active through the season. So some are just active for a very short period of time, and that will coincide with their particular plant flowering. But the continuity of having floral resource through the whole spring and summer is really important. So trees and shrubs are often really good in the spring. So we've got blackthorn here. If you've seen any bees out so far, I've seen lots on the crocuses. So they're really important at this time of year, and primroses coming out. And you sort of go through the summer, you tend to have quite a lot more flowers out, things like you know, legumes and umbellifers are really important. Then you get into sort of the bramble season. And then ivy is one of the best plants for our wild pollinators, absolutely fantastic at producing that sort of final feast for any pollinators that overwinter as adults. So as well as what the adults feed on, we need to have a little think about what larvae feed on. So I've said that in bees, they feed on the pollen that is sort of provisioned for them, or it's sometimes a sort of a pollen and nectar mix. But other species, so our hoverflies, butterflies, moths, they tend to feed on plants, and they're quite often quite specific about the plant. So for example, our small blue butterfly, they lay their eggs on kidney vetch, and then the larvae just eat the kidney vetch plant. Hoverflies have quite a wide range of larval feeding habitats. Some are predatory on aphids, as I've already mentioned. There's a couple of species that actually lay their eggs in wasp and ants nests, so they eat the wasp and ant larvae. And some feed on plants, and quite a lot of them sort of aquatic plants, so sort of wet features are really important. So yeah, these are sort of the things that we need to think about for the habitats that are needed for the larvae and for egg laying, and things like dead wood are really important, water, bare earth, a lot of the solitary bees are bare earth, and vegetation. So things like bees, for example. So on the top left, we've got a bumblebee nest. You can see they're all in there together. And bumblebees quite often use old mammal holes. So they like tussocky grassland and mammal holes in that. Lots of our solitary bees like bare ground. So in the top middle, we've got ivy bees nesting in a bank of soil, and bottom middle, you've got a nice chalk grassland slope, and you might look at that and go, oh, that's terribly bare, we need some flowers on there. But you can see all that bare earth is really, really important for them to nest on. I've just put on the bottom left, this is our red-tailed mason bee, and this nests in snail shells. So we've got about 2 species that just nest in snail shells. So completely sort of specific in their requirements, but we'll see those up on the downs. And then compared to on the bottom right, we've got our red mason bee. You have to get them not confused. One's red-tailed mason bee and one's red mason bee. That will nest in a variety of sort of pre-existing holes and cavities, in sort of timbers, plant stems, that sort of thing. And that's the one that you'll see if you have a bee box, a bee hotel. They'll go for that, definitely. And then very quickly, the sort of things that they need, a lot of our pollinators need to overwinter. They're very similar to some of our sort of breeding locations, but they need things like long grass, tussocky grass, dead stems, woods, compost heaps are brilliant, cavities in walls and holes. So I always think this is a really important one to sort of think about for gardening, about maybe having a little untidy corner, that sort of thing. And I mentioned very briefly about this mosaic of habitats that's needed for species, and just to sort of reiterate that point, that we have one of our common hoverflies called the dronefly. The adults need nectar sources, but and they're not too fussy on the nectar sources, so as long as they're these nice open plants, then that will be fine. But the larvae they lay their eggs in sort of rotting vegetation in aquatic habitats, so they need ponds, ditches, sort of puddles, that sort of thing. So they need to have those quite close together. And then this is our woolcarder bee. So you might see these ones in your garden. The adult is on the wing in June and July and feeds on flowers from the pea family. So it might be things like toadflax, birdsfoot trefoil, also mint and lavender can be really good. So it's a bit particular about the type of flowers it uses, but it's also a little bit fussy in its nesting habitat. So it needs holes in dead wood, and whether it's a sort of artificial bee hotel like this one, or just sort of stems, plant stems. But the female also lines her nest with really fine hairs that she collects from hairy leaf plants like lamb's ear. So you need all 3 of those things in an area for that particular species to actually complete the whole of its life cycle. If you haven't got one of them, it's not going to be there. So it's just to show that yes, it's not just the flowers. So we've had a little look at our pollinators, and I'm just very briefly just to say that we are worried about our pollinating insects. So 60% of all UK species, so this isn't just pollinators or invertebrates, are in decline. And it's estimated that over 1,200 species of invertebrate have gone extinct in the UK in the last 100 years. And there's lots of reasons for this. And I won't sort of, again, go into too much depth on this, but loss of wildflower-rich grassland is really important. And the fact that much of what we've got left is small and fragmented, and so it's that connectivity in the wildlife corridors that someone else was just mentioning, really, really important for lots of them. Climate change is also an issue. There's winners and losers in that one, and pesticides definitely have a detrimental effect on our pollinators. If all that sounds a little bit depressing, there are things that we can all do to sort of reverse this decline. So number 1 rule is to protect what we've got. So whether that is up on the downs, this is a lovely site we surveyed this year. It's got lots of our sort of rare and threatened bees on here, but it might be you've got in your garden or green space, you've already got something that's really good for pollinators. So number one rule, look after that bit first. But gardens can be amazing for wildlife, not just pollinators. They can provide a really good network of varied habitat for pollinators, and also, you know, a sanctuary for ourselves, especially at this sort of time when we can't get out very far. And the potential of gardens is enormous. So there's an estimated 16 million gardens in the UK, which apparently equates to about 500,000 hectares. And if you think about that figure, that is just huge. That's bigger than all of the nature reserves put together. And, you know, we can all make a difference there. And you can contribute to that, whether you have got a window box or you've got, you know, a large estate. We can all make changes that can be really, really positive. So the sorts of things that we can do are, if you have a lawn, you can consider cutting it a little less often. So that gives plants such as daisies, and I know lots of people don't like dandelions, but dandelions are great nectar, and clover, just a little chance to flower. So that's like nectar and pollen for our insects. And, you know, you don't have to do this over your whole lawn. You could perhaps think, well, we'll have a little patch and let that grow up. And it can also be really good for sort of some of our green spaces, leaving some areas in our sort of parks and green spaces to let the grass grow long. So that provides overwintering and sheltering opportunities for insects. And this is actually a really good first step to see if there's any floral resource comes up. If you sort of just lessen the mowing, you might find something amazing comes up. And I actually love this photo of a park because it looks very deliberate that the grass has been left to grow. You know, the paths are still cut through. It doesn't look as if it's just been sort of left and no one's looking after it. And I think that's often a really important one to do. Like I say, you never know what might turn up in your grassland. This has turned up in people's before, a lovely bee orchid. And things like churchyards and cemeteries. This is a really good one because they're often have got quite species rich grassland, and just changing mowing regime can just allow all of those species a chance to get going. Excuse me. So as well as thinking about grass, you could try sowing some wildflowers. If you leave your grass and nothing sort of comes up, you can just allow the you can sow some wildflower planting, and you can do that from seed, or you could do some plug planting. But this can work really, really well. And this is an area in a park where some of this has been done. And I think this is the sort of nice sort of mosaic, because when you've got long grass, you've got short grass, you've got flowering plants for the nectar and pollen, you've got hedgerows and mature trees for early season nectar, and that overwintering and sheltering habitat as well. You could think about planting a tree. So fruit trees are brilliant. You can get sizes to fit any size garden. You'll be doing a great service for the insects. You'll also get something in return, which is always really nice. And I'm often asked what sort of plants we should actually plant in our gardens, whether we should do native or non-native. And I think I've put this slide in just to show that formal planting can be really good. So the aster family and Rebeckias, nice open plants. These are all brilliant for insects. And general rules really about which plants are good are that simple flowers are better than sort of flowers that have been bred to have sort of, you know, double flowered. Basically that breeding gets rid of all of the pollen and nectar, so they're of no use to our insects at all. So things like, I mean, if you think of sort of cottage garden plants, you know, they can be brilliant. Foxgloves are brilliant. I really like a bit of Viper's bugloss, and catmint can be really good. Sedums for later on. Things like Mahonia in the winter are really fantastic. And when I'm asked about sort of native or non-native, there is a little bit of evidence that native is better than non-native for sort of nectar and pollen, but it's only a little bit of evidence. So I would say in your own garden, do as you would like, but perhaps if you're sort of nearer the sort of countryside, perhaps think about doing native. And I think where native really comes in is when we're thinking about what the larvae and the caterpillars feed on. And so sort of coming back to what I said about a lot of our larvae of butterflies and moths feed on very particular plants. So native is definitely more important for the larval stages. Pop this one in here just to show that basically no space is too small to be improved for pollinators. This is just a great demonstration of a little area in a car park has been sensibly planted with lavender. There's some umbellifera at the back, and I think it's sort of some corn marigold or something like that near the sign. So any small area can be, if it's planted sensibly, can provide that floral resource. So just sort of finally coming on to a few bits of general advice, I would say don't be too tidy. I often say that what people consider weeds are what I like to think of as native wildflowers. They're really good nectar sources. So, I'm not saying you have to do this over your whole garden, but rough, untidy corners can be really, really important. This is an area in a park that's just been left, hasn't been cut. I'm not suggesting that this is what you would want to do in your garden, but just to show in a park, you can have these sort of wilder areas. Keeping some dead wood on site can be really important. If you have to fell a tree, keep a nice stump or some of the dead wood, and that's good for all sorts of insects, not just pollinating insects. Having some water in your garden is amazing. It's good for our pollinators. Wetland plants provide really good forage. All insects need a drink. And you'll get things like dragonflies and damselflies, frogs, and they really don't, it doesn't have to be a big pond. This one on the right is just a washing up bowl with some water and some plants, and that will provide really important resources for all sorts of wildlife. I'll quickly touch on bee banks. Again, this is probably not something you want to do in your garden, but if you have any influence over parks and that sort of thing, we've got a natural bee bank on our left-hand side and then an artificial one on the right. And these are just sort of sunny crescents where all of those mining bees can go in and nest. And you can plant them up with a few wildflowers and provide that nectar resource as well. Many people in their gardens like a bee hotel. You can buy these, you can make them, you can just drill some holes in a bit of wood. Just needs to be popped in a nice sunny place off the ground, so sort of waist, chest height. I've got one in my garden, and I have the red mason bee, and some leafcutter bees come and visit, but they've never actually nested in there. So that's something that's really good, and also good for kids to get involved with. Also, another really good one too, kids seem to love this, is to have a little hoverfly lagoon, and all this is a pot of water with some decaying leaves or grass cuttings, something like that. This hoverfly on the right, which is Eristalis tenax, will come and lay her eggs in there, and then kids seem to love looking for the larvae. They're called rat-tailed maggots, which have these really long tails, and kids seem absolutely fascinated with them. So again, just a little bit of water is brilliant. And then a final one, just to really say, avoid the use of pesticides as much as you can. These are harmful to our pollinators, and other wildlife as well. So just a quick thank you to some people that have provided all the photos in here. Thank you very much for listening, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Either Leslie, thank you very much for that. Alice, yeah, Leslie.
Sorry, my volume's done something strange. It's all right. Can't hear. Yeah, thanks, Alice. That was brilliant. As you know, I'm a bit mad on anything pollinator, so yeah, it's just great to see all that information and hear everything as well. We've got a few questions that have been coming in while you've been talking, so I'm just going to quickly scroll back.
Okay.
The first one came in just as you started. Steve was asking, every late summer our lawn is covered in bees. They fly around just above the surface of the lawn with a series of holes in the lawn. Any ideas what these might be?
That will be it will be a solitary bee of some sort. So if they've got holes in the lawn, that's where they're sort of coming out of. So any more than that, I wouldn't be able to say without a photo, but it'll be a solitary bee of some sort.
Great, thank you. People saying they didn't realise that moths were pollinators as well, which is
yeah, lots of people.
That's all.
Just don't consider it.
Yeah, absolutely. Or anywhere else? What else have we got? Jackie's living in France now, and she was just saying that it's amazing to see the different wildlife. She's got more there, more wildlife in France, but sadly declining due to farming, pesticides, and the hedgerows being removed. They've got black carpenter bees with very
they're nice. They're big.
They sound lovely.
They're huge.
And Lawrence was asking about thoughts on green walls, not living walls, but direct or indirect facades. How useful are they for biodiversity?
I think they must have, I don't know that much about them, but I think they must have somehow. I mean, it will obviously depend what's sort of put on them, but yes, I would think they probably have some help, but some benefit, but I don't know enough about them, and I don't know if any sort of research has actually been done on them. So yeah, I can't really answer that one. I don't actually know.
Questions.
And Lucy was asking, what was the name of the bee that uses lamb's ear?
So that's the wool carder bee.
Awesome. Lucy seems happy with that. That's good. That's the facades again.
Again, lots of thank you.
I think we've got some hands up as well, Leslie, if you want to do some of these for a second.
Yeah, do you want to do those? Because I can't see them. So.
That's okay. I've had Phil Rose has had his hand up for a little while as well. So Phil, would you like to come in? I think you're muted at the moment, Phil. Still muted. Okay, we'll come back to you, Phil. Jim has also had his hand up as well. You there, Jim?
Okay. Yeah. Hi, Alex. Really good talk. Thank you very much. One thing I wanted to come back to you about was planting flowers. Generally speaking, obviously, that's great. The one thing I have an issue with is on unimproved chalk grassland. I think you have to be really careful about planting flowers on good quality chalk grassland.
I wouldn't suggest planting any flowers on good quality chalk grass. Definitely not. Good. No, this is talking about on your lawns or parks and stuff like that. It's that first sort of thing I said. It's like know what you've got and look after what you've got. So if you've got
I mean that's right. I mean the thing is in Seaford, for instance, and I think that might be well true in other places. A lot of people have actually got really good quality chalk grassland in their gardens.
Right.
Realize it, and it's a fantastic resource, but it's going to be flower rich, and making it flower rich will actually destroy it.
Absolutely, yes. It is that thing of knowing what you've got, definitely.
Brilliant.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool. Thanks, Jim. Phil,
Phil.
you're there now, I think.
I think I'm here. Am I here?
You are
You are.
absolutely there.
Thank you very much. First of all, I apologise. I've got such an unstable connection that I'm trying to type in the chat and it keeps sending it before I've finished. So they're not very strange requests for people. It's just been a technical glitch. Now, I'd really like to ask it. That was fascinating. That was so fascinating, that talk about the pollinators. But I just wanted to ask, and it's a very just a personal thing. When a sleepy bee is inside the house, and it's obviously very easy to catch, what is the best thing to do with that bee? It's just something that I always sort of struggle with. Do I put it back outside? What do you do with it?
I would suggest pop it back outside if you're able to. Then yes, I mean it's really at this time of year that sometimes you'll get a sort of a sleepy queen that's gotten into the house or hasn't been able to find any nectar, so you can give them just a little bit of sugar and that will revive them and then pop them outside. But generally, just put them outside, catch them and put them outside.
Cool.
Thank you very much. Yeah, no, I'd never thought of giving a bee some sugar, of course. In a house, just it's like such an obvious thing to do, but thank you very much. That's really helped me.
Okay.
Oh, brilliant. Back to you then, Leslie. I think we've got a few more in the chat.
Yeah. Just drop down. Can golfers coexist with flowers? Talking about golf course fairways.
Well, I mean, I see no reason why not. With the obviously the fairways are not brilliant and they're a bit heavy on the keeping them nice and with sort of pesticides and herbicides, that sort of thing. But there's lots of rough areas and that sort of thing. So there's lots of potential for sort of connections to the landscape and that sort of thing. So there's no reason why they can't be really good for all sorts of wildlife.
Jim, do you want to come in on that? I see you've got your hand poised.
Absolutely, yeah. Royal St George's Golf Course in Sandwich in Kent, which is one of the premier golf courses in the country, is also home to one of the best colonies of lizard orchids in the country. So when we were there a few years ago, we were admiring these wonderful lizard orchids, and the golfers were coming along to us and saying, "What are you looking at? Flowers here, good grief, I've never seen them before. These are great." It's amazing, and they didn't see them, but there's dozens of them there. Yeah.
Awesome.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Great to know that. Brilliant.
Yeah,
I think we've had a couple more come in, Leslie. I think that you might have passed.
Someone was asking where's the best place to buy plants from and grow from organic seed.
I don't really have any recommendations. There's a company called Rosie Bee Plants, which is sort of on the internet, which I know are quite good. But I'm sure there must be somewhere a bit more local to us.
I think Paradise Park in New Haven do quite a lot of organic plants as well and organic seeds too. So it might be worth going and asking them as well. Definitely.
Oh, I've scrolled past a couple.
That's okay. There's one from Mary and one from Julia, I think.
Yeah, I've just spotted those. Right. Mary was asking how close can she put up her bee hotel? She's got a small shed and would like to put some on there.
How close together?
Presumably. Mary, do you want to?
Some nodding, some frantic nodding from Mary there.
How close together?
You there, Alice?
Yeah.
Sorry.
How close together can they be?
Well, I would say not touching, so maybe a couple of meters. I mean, if you had a fence, you could put one on each fence post, I think would be fine.
Cool. Thanks, Alice.
And Julia was asking, is there any research as to whether pollinators change or can change their diet for preferred fruit or preferred food?
Not that I'm aware of.
I think Lucy's just had her hand up as well. Lucy, do you want to pop in?
Hello, thanks very much. Thanks, Alice. Really fascinating talk. I just put in something in the comment box about where to buy plants from. I'm a gardener in Lewes, and I was reading some research by Dave Goulson at the University of Sussex, a research that he did about 2 or 3 years ago. I don't know if anyone's come across it, where he took some plants from Aldi, Homebase, B&Q and Wyvale and tested them. The ones that have RHS award for pollinators, garden merit, put these in your garden, buying them from some places, they have actually been treated with various chemicals which can be of damage to pollinators. Not actually direct death, but maybe causing flight issues or reduction in eggs laid or whatever. And it was just worth noting that when he published that, Wyvale and Homebase didn't get back to him at all to try and change their supply chain or anything, or they hadn't when I last looked a few months ago. But Aldi and B&Q did straight away change their supply. So if people are, most people that I know go to Wyvale in Lewes, which is now called British Garden Centres, I think, and they see the RHS sign and they think good for pollinators. But actually, if people can buy organically, or as George said, anywhere like Paradise Park or Garden Organic online, Tamar Organics online, Sarah Raven online, it's really worth looking online, and people maybe just growing from seed organically as well. You can't always just assume that a large garden centre actually hasn't done things like that. So that was Dave Goulson at the University of Sussex. I just thought that was worth mentioning in case, I'm not boycotting those places necessarily, but specifically in relation to pollinators, they may not be the best place to get things from.
Oh, that's brilliant.
That's
Thank
fascinating.
You.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Any more for any more?
Also save seeds from many flowers, Robert's just said. That's a good call.
Yeah.
I've got nothing coming in through the Facebook Live yet. So there's the last orders for Facebook Live if you want to submit any questions. Does anyone else want to frantically wave their hand at us? No?
Any other questions?
I think that might be that. Yeah.
It's all gone quiet. Brilliant.
Nothing showing up there. Cool.
We're all going to go around our gardens now and sort our planting out. And my internet connection has just gone funny. I do apologise.
Just quickly then, if it's okay, we obviously, as part of the project's been majority funded by the lottery and by bids through the lottery. And one of the things that we've got to do in order to keep that money, unfortunately, is to basically ask you all how you heard about this meeting and heard about the whole project for Wilder Gardens. So I'm going to pop a little poll up on the screen, if you don't mind. If you could just select an option, we'd really appreciate it. So thank you very much. I'll just, if you wouldn't mind, just very quickly, if we could interrupt it just for a second to do that, that'd be brilliant. Thank you very much. Wow, look at that. Flying in now. Oh, it's fascinating to watch. It's like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? Ask the audience. Brilliant.
Great.
But thank you very much, Alice, though. That was really good.
Yeah, that's great. Karen, do you want to hop in? I think there was a couple of things you wanted to say.
Steve, who is our new secretary, which we'll be voting on in a bit, he's going to be putting a map up on our website. So what we want is everybody that is doing something to put on their map their postcode, so that we can start to get an idea of the connectivity and where we need to target, who we need to work with to try and get those corridors. That's what we're really trying to achieve, and verges and everything else. So did I have anything else to say? There was something else. And volunteers. If anybody actually wants to help us do this, we need feet on the ground to give people advice and just support them, answer their questions. So we're looking for a whole team of volunteers to come and join us. They're not flying in now, are they?
I would have joined you if I'd still been in the UK. I almost wish I was, actually. I didn't know
Oh,
about this.
bless you.
Oh,
Well,
thank
we'd
you,
love to have
Jackie.
you, Jackie. It's a shame you're not here.
Lucy has said that she'd like to get involved as well, which is great.
Brilliant, thank you.
Thank you, Lucy.
We'll be in touch. Or Karen will, or one of us.
And for those watching on Facebook as well, am I right in saying that there's going to be an email going out at some point as well, Karen, about this?
Yeah. And if you're not on our database, message us on Facebook or email us and we'll pop you on.
Super duper.
Anne's just saying she's been press ganged.
Anne's going to be doing our writing for us on our blog. So none of you have seen any of her articles, they are super, super inspiring and her photos are outstanding. So yeah, look out for them, they're brilliant.
Cool.
Great. So I think that's more or less it as far as the presentation part of the evening is concerned. We just need to do a little bit of network business. If any of our groups are with us, if you'd like to stay for a few minutes just so that we can finalise Steve's co-option as secretary and deal with the financial side of things, which is all very exciting. Other than that, I'd just like to say thank you to Alice and to Dan for our lovely talks. And thank you to everyone who's managed to get online. We've obviously got some teething problems with the Eventbrite bits and pieces, so we need to sort those out for the next meeting, for the next talk. But other than that, thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
On the next talks.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.